thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you for your participation. What I wanted to do just to lead off is to give a little bit of a framework with regards to today's roundtable discussion, and then start to lead us into the conversation. So this morning what we're going to be working on basically is we're going to have a series of 4 presentations that are going to help frame the issue for us, get a little bit more in depth with regards to the issues of litter and dumping here in the city of Pittsburgh. And then one of the things that we've done in preparation for today's roundtable is we've used social media to help us create a series of questions that will guide the conversation. So we used the city's Engage Pittsburgh platform to help us solicit questions from residents, to help have the experts here around the table to give them a little bit of food for them to chew on here today. So to start our conversation, we're going to have Sarah Alessio Shea from the Clean Pittsburgh Commission. Sarah is the chair of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, as well as working for the Pennsylvania Resources Council, followed by Justin Stockdale, Myrna Newman, and Professor Erik Garrett from Duquesne University. Following their presentations, we might have a special guest join us today to give us some remarks, but then we'll also have a question and answer session so that all participants here today could add value to the conversation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to help frame the conversation for us. Sarah?
Thank you, Grant. Good morning, everybody. So I'd like to thank, the Mayor's Office and the Department of Innovation and Performance for holding this roundtable. You know, litter and illegal dumping, it's definitely an issue that's been prevalent, in the city of Pittsburgh for a number of years. And so it's really great to see a group of people willing to sit down together, really look to try to come up with some new ideas and solve problems that's been, a long-standing issue going forward. So what I'm going to be doing is really framing the issue as far as some of the data we currently have on litter and illegal dumping, looking at numbers, like kind of gauging what's the status of the city of Pittsburgh on these issues. I'm new at the screen, so I'm going to hopefully tap it and move forward for me. Let's see. All right. So first, looking at litter. So litter is in the city code. It mentions no person shall cause any waste paper, sweeping, ashes, refuse, rubbish, dangerous or detrimental substance on street, sidewalk, public place, gutter, sewer, vacant lot, you name it. And it starts with a minimum fine of $15 and goes up from there. Now, obviously that hasn't really stopped, folks from littering and littering from coming from other sources. So really looking at what is the status of litter in the city of Pittsburgh? How do we rank as far as other cities? How bad or, maybe good are we? And what was done in April, led by Allegheny Cleanways Keep Pittsburgh Beautiful, was what's called a litter index. It's a tool that Keep America Beautiful has developed, and it's a way for organizations, cities, to really look and find out what's the level of litter. It's based on a scale of 1 to 4. Let me see if I can pull that scale up. Awesome. There we go. I don't know if you guys can see it. So it ranks 1, minimal, no litter, 2, slightly littered, 3, littered, 4, extremely littered. So how the survey was done was the city was split into 4 different areas, 5, north, south, east, west, and central. And those areas were further split into 10 one-mile-long sections. So the city was rated in 50 one-mile-long sections. Those sections ranged. They were residential, they were business districts, they were industrial, they were even wooded areas, so it was a really good cross-section. And there were scores, representatives from the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, Allegheny Cleanways, Pennsylvania Resources Council there, independently scored it as we drove around from 1 to 4. So, scores were kept secret from each other. Then at the end, that score was tallied, and the score that we got at the end there was that 2.46 that you'll see right there. So somewhere between, slightly littered and littered. So, not extremely littered all over the place, but definitely not minimal or no litter. Kind of middle of the ground was kind of how the city was ranked. Some of the other items that we saw of note were some of the business districts was kind of a shock to us. Driving down Fifth Avenue, middle of the day in Oakland, clean, very minimal, no litter, 1. Even some areas of the south side, some areas, especially the city of Pittsburgh. And you might, relate that back to what kind of programs do they have in place for people maybe preventative measures, but more maybe cleanup measures in those areas. Other things we noted were 1 mile long stretches that contain both a 1 and a 4 within a 1 mile long. You'd go beautiful, beautiful, residential, you'd hit a vacant or abandoned property, a 4. And so that really, changed the score. So what could we do in that situation? How can we manage a vacant lot minimally to really make it so that's not a hotbed for litter? So those are some of the items that we kind of saw that, really struck us in that litter index. And so this number and this information can be used in a number of different ways. You could look at it based on the area. What's the number for north, south, east, west? How do we extrapolate that moving out? Do we use it as a way to focus programming, or do we also use it as a way to gauge success? Do we do this next year, the year after, and really see, are we lowering that litter index number? So that's kind of on the status of litter where we currently stand. Some of the other ways that we're gathering data, or the city gathers data on litter, is through 311, phone calls that they get, whether it's, overflowing trash cans, whether it's litter on the street, or maybe it's I'm a community group and I did a cleanup and I have 3 bags of trash that I want the city to pick up. So it can be looking at data in different ways through 311 as well. And then community groups itself, Department of Public Works, they track volunteers, they track bags of trash, looking at that at the end of the year. What are those numbers equaling out to? We might know what some of those costs are for paid staff, but how much are kind of we getting as far as free service in community groups and organizations doing mostly cleanup efforts. So that's kind of the litter side of it. Let's see about moving on to the, thank you. Moving on to the illegal dumping section of it. So illegal dumps, as far as like a definition for illegal dumping, I'm just trying to think of, it's more accumulated litter that you're looking at, maybe up to 50 pounds or more in one area, larger items, larger debris. Back in 2009, Keep America Beautiful did a survey in the city of Pittsburgh of illegal dump sites. At that time, 279 were determined. After that, Allegheny Cleanways has been working since 2009 to gather continual more data and have found an additional 250 illegal dump sites in the city. So that leaves us, since about 2009, an estimated 529 sites currently identified in the city. Since then, about that time, 339 have been cleaned, which is a very impressive number, I do have to say, but which still leaves a lot of material and debris out there. There's about 1,800 acres estimated to be covered with debris in the city of Pittsburgh, and some of the common items found: construction and demolition waste, yard debris, recyclables, and a large number of tires. This 14,000, was from the lots that have been cleaned up thus far, so a pretty good amount. And if you look at, let's see, up here, one of these spaces, I'm sorry, can you go forward again? Somewhere I have a little, you click over here on the screen. There we go. Illegal dump sites by weight in the city. So this is kind of what we're looking at. About 79% of the sites are 5,000 pounds or less of material on them. So they, a larger portion of them are in the smaller scale range. 5,000 pounds is nothing to shake a stick at. That's still a lot of material. But looking at it in that regard, maybe they are a manageable, that can be cleaned up. Another issue with it is cost. Estimated cost for illegal dump sites, $600 to $800 to $800 per ton, about $3,000 per site. And so if you extrapolate $3,000 per site out for 529 sites, that's almost $1.6 million to clean up. So it's, nothing, inexpensive. It's an investment, definitely. But Allegheny Cleanways has looked back and some of the sites that they've cleaned up to really see, is dumping coming back on those sites? And a fair amount of their sites, I think only 10% that they looked at came back as full-fledged dumping sites. The other ones had little to no dumping on them, so a good investment. Can you click back off of that slide? And then I just wanted to pull up real quick, if you click on that current data link right there and see if it comes up. This is kind of what Allegheny Cleanways currently has as far as the data on illegal dumping. I'm in the city. Maybe it won't be able to come up. But it's you can look at it, pinpoints locations throughout the city. There you go. And green being sites that have been cleaned up, red being sites that still need to be looked at, and you can pinpoint on them and see, where the site is, how much material is on it. So even looking at what sites do we still need to clean up in the city, you could click on a red, see at 1,000 tons or so set up on there, look at the location. So it's a great data collection tool to really look at. If you're looking at neighborhood-wise, city-wise, section-wise, you can really look at some great data on here. So you can close that, please. And so all that data, really, the baseline was that 2009 KAB study, and then additional information added from Allegheny Cleanways, volunteers, 311 calls, and so on and so forth. Can you move to the next slide? And so other things I just wanted to mention are some of the other data gathering tools. I mentioned the 311, and also I recently got an email from District 3, Council District 3, and they had been using vocabulary to track calls that were coming into their office. So they were able to give a rundown of, in 2015 so far, one of the vocabulary words they used was dumping. They could look at 3% of their calls were about dumping in their district. I didn't see litter on the list, but at least that might be a separate way for council districts or other folks to look at, beyond 311, maybe calls that aren't going there, that are going directly to the council members. What level of littering or illegal dumping is an issue in my community, and looking at it that way, which is great. GTech, I don't know if that'll come up too. Do you mind clicking on that GTech link? They have lots of love. They have a couple different data gathering tools. Oh, that's all right. They are doing a tool in the north side right now. It's a number of layers that they have. It's an online tool similar to Allegheny Cleanways, where you could look at not only vacant lots, but they also have information layers that they can put on their mapping. So it could be litter, it could be illegal dumping. The only issue that we're seeing with all of these data is that they're not necessarily cohesive. So if we have one set that's being done through one organization, but then a second organization is now starting with another data set, how do those match up? If they don't, then we have these two separate data sets, and are they assisting each other? Pathview is a group that's working on, they actually have an app that as you walk around you can put, I see mailboxes, I see curbs that need fixing, and could that be extrapolated out to things like trash cans, litter, illegal dump sites, so on and so forth. So just other ways to gather data. Nationwide and worldwide, some of the ones that are available. One is the Literati. This is more of like an educational and tracking tool. So folks can pretty much see pieces of litter that they come across, they take photos of it, they hashtag it, and then it goes into this large digital landfill map. And you can see it's actually worldwide. You can look at, there's locations in Pittsburgh that people have taken pictures of the litter that they've thrown away. So it's not only educational to look and see who's doing what in what areas, but they also track by material and brand. So they'll say, 10,000 pieces were plastics, or 1,000 of our pieces were Starbucks cups. And so how do we want to use that data? Do we want to use that data to kind of pressure those companies in a certain way, or so on and so forth? And then the last one is Philadelphia's litter mapping. I think if you just click on somewhere on the screen, it should pop up. So what they did was they just mapped their litter index. So they, did 2007, 2008, they did a litter index like we had done a couple months back, and then 4 or 5 years later did the exact same litter index to really gauge and look at based on, okay, well, in these areas, they are improving. We are going from a 3 to a 2, a 2 to a 1. So we can really use, this data in a way to try to gauge if our programs are working. And lastly, I just wanted to kind of pull up, do you mind going to the last slide? Just some questions that maybe we can look at, once we get to that portion. So there's a lot of great data out there. More can definitely be gathered. But what's the end goal of all this data? Do we want it to drive our programming, gauge success? Do we want to educate the public with it? And then 2, when we have so many different models and frameworks, how do we make sure that there's one cohesive one that we're going to? So thank you. That's the presentation. And next will be Justin Stockdale from the Pennsylvania Resources Council.
Thank you, Sarah, for putting some context to what is behind litter and what litter is relative to the city of Pittsburgh. I'm going to ask you all, when my presentation comes up, to use your imagination a little bit. The title of the presentation is The High Cost of Litter. Litter and cost of litter is a pretty impossible thing to decipher. There are far too many people involved, and that's, again, where I'll ask you to for your imagination. This first slide I put up on here, this picture was on the cover of Pittsburgh Magazine back in December of 2013. That's Mayor David Lawrence holding a sign that says team up for cleanup. I put this on here to show that we've been chasing litter for a lot of years in Pittsburgh. This is not a new thing. This is not a new debate. This is not a new conversation. This has been an ongoing challenge for Pittsburgh and every city and every urban area across the country and the world for that matter for a long, long time. So one of the questions I ask myself in terms of what is the cost of litter is to try to understand who all is out there chasing litter. So to try to give us some context of all the different efforts that are going on in the city of Pittsburgh and the region around litter, I tried to capture a pretty quick list of who's all out there engaged on litter, who's cleaning it up, who's advocating for education programs, who's providing mechanical resources, public litter cans, the rest of it. So you can see that it's a pretty long list of folks who are involved in litter. If you try to capture the costs from each one of these organizations, the numbers start to skyrocket pretty quick. And keep in mind, these in the next couple of slides are not meant to be 100% encompassing. There's folks that I've missed. The goal is, again, to just sort of set the stage. There's a lot of activity on litter. There's a lot of people investing a lot of time, energy, and money into the issue of litter. The only stat, actually, that I've been able to come up with around litter is in 2009, Keep America Beautiful pegged the cost of litter in America at like $11.2 billion a year. So you're talking about huge sums of money. So then if we know who's chasing litter, who's involved in the litter issue, then what are we doing about litter? And there's two basic things that we tend to do as a society around the issue of litter. One, we focus on prevention, so how do we stop the litter from happening before it does? This takes the education, it takes the provision of alternatives to litter, so you have to have a public garbage can if you don't want the litter to happen in the first place. It's advertising, it's marketing, it's also enforcement actions, so police efforts to try to limit the behavior of littering. And then there's the back end of it, which is cleanup. It's volunteer cleanups, it's paid staff cleanups, it's routine. We clean up this street every week. It's episodic. Wow, there's a big illegal dump site, let's go clean that up once and for all. And on the right, I put up a list of these are all the different sort of campaigns around litter in Pittsburgh. Some of them are cleanups, some of them are education efforts. Again, a quick short list of, there's 11, 12 different programs ongoing today in Pittsburgh focused on litter. It sums up to a whole bunch of money, time, and energy is being invested in the issue of litter in Pittsburgh. And I think that, the lesson I take away from this, and that Sarah mentioned it in her last statement, was how do we consolidate some of these efforts and try to bring them together to have a more impactful effort. And we're not all, running down our own path, but we're trying to consolidate the effort under one roof. And again, I think that's been a challenge all the way back to that first slide of, team up to clean up. I'm certain in that era there were multiple efforts around litter. It wasn't just team up to clean up. And so then I asked myself just sort of loosely, where is litter coming from? And this is not necessarily a question of cost of litter, but I think this is an important question for us to ask and for us to understand. Just what is litter and where does it come from? Litter, obviously, it's bottles and cans, it's car tires, it's pieces of cars. A lot of it is intentional, I suppose, that people actively go out and illegally dump a pile of garbage. People throwing things out their windows in their car. We've all seen it driving around. The folks down at the point, leaving their leftover drink cups along the fountain. But there's a whole lot of it that's unintentional. I don't think any of us can drive around the city or drive, period, and not have had one moment in their lives where the piece of newspaper blew out the back window of the car as you were driving down the road. That happens frequently. There is a lot of unintentional litter that goes on. It's out of our vehicles. It's out of waste collection trucks. Garbage trucks driving around the city inherently are going to lose some litter as they go. It's not intentional. There's nobody to cite or fine for it. It's a function of how those trucks work. I followed a Comcast truck down 65 a couple weeks ago, and a box of sign material blew out the back of his truck. Again, that's not his intention to lose that box, but it happened. So we need to address litter from those sources as well. You can back up, Afton, real quick. There's also, as we collect solid waste from residences, people set out bags of garbage, they set out cans of garbage. Inherently, there is going to be litter generated through that process. So I think, in my mind, if we're going to address litter holistically, we need to think about all the sources of litter and try to attack all of them in some way, so we're not just, again, picking out, we're going to go after the folks that throw their litter out the window and that's it. That's only one component of this. And then the event public space litter problem. And all of us have been to events in the city of Pittsburgh or anywhere for that matter. Public spaces generate litter. People go to the regatta, they go to the arts festival. We're going to create litter because they're in a public space. There's not always a garbage can right where they want it. Walking down any street in Pittsburgh, you finish your coffee, you've got an empty coffee cup, where does it go? If there's not a garbage can immediately available, some people are prone to drop it right where they stand. So it's the public space question, I think, is probably, at least in my mind, the biggest source of our litter problem is what do we do when people are out and about and they're not in their home, they're not in their car? How do we manage that material? So I took a couple of quick examples, and the folks in this room will recognize some of these slides or some of this information on these slides. To put some real dollars to this and to put some real costs behind litter, our friends at PennDOT, Angelo Pampina and Scott Kovach helped me out with this information. In 2015, year to date, DOT in Allegheny County has spent almost $600,000 chasing litter on the highways around Allegheny County. They do this through a paid staff. A crew of, I think, 4 people go out every summer managing litter. There's also correction crews that go out and pick up litter. There's obviously volunteers and Adopt a Road and Adopt a Highway. Those numbers aren't incorporated in that almost $600,000. And then there's the mechanical tools, and I threw a picture up there. That's a $80,000 piece of equipment that can be used to attempt to manage litter on highways that I've seen out on DOT roads throughout western Pennsylvania. There's, again, a lot of money going into just Allegheny County's portion, or PennDOT's portion of Allegheny County roads. The next slide, again, that got scrambled, but that's a list of all the roads. This was published in a press release on June 15th, or the week of June 15th for Allegheny County DOT. And these are the roads that they are managing or providing litter control on for the week of June 15th. It's some 55 miles of road in that 1 week, and that's going to go on all summer long, repeated over and over and over again. They're out there picking up litter on these roads. I'm sure it's a repeat. Some roads are hit in the early part of the year, and some are hit again in the fall. And you can bet all these roads are hit every year. And so the highways on here are 28, 376, 79. They're all the major thoroughfares through western Pennsylvania. Another sort of look at the cost of litter is I took a glance and was introduced to a recent project in the city of Pittsburgh where they're GPS locating all of the public trash receptacles that are managed by the city of Pittsburgh. Through this process to date, they've found about 2,050 of these containers located on the public right-of-way. So this does not include parks, this does not include public spaces, this is just roadside litter cans, trash cans that are managed and supported by the City of Pittsburgh Public Works Department. Right now, they're piloting a monitoring system to get after a on-demand service model. And this relates to the reality that they have 24 full-time positions dedicated to servicing these 2,000 waste receptacles in the city of Pittsburgh. That's a bunch of manpower, that's a bunch of dollars, all chasing the issue of litter. The goal is with the on-demand service, so you have a sensor that reads when the can is full, you service the container when it's full, not on a consistent route, so you don't have people circling the city nonstop, looking at cans that frankly are empty. You have them servicing only the cans that are full, and when they're full, they get serviced, which is a really important piece of this. Another sort of salient point here is that through this process, they have identified the containers that are old, that are beat up, that have been run over and hit by cars. They've submitted a budget request, or will submit a budget request, as I've been told, for approximately 200 containers to be replaced on a 2-year cycle. Those containers can cost upwards of $1,500 a piece. You know, again, big, huge investments on the issue of litter. And I threw this in there just to sort of tease a question that's been oft-talked about, certainly around our table at the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, is a funding question. Where do we get funding for all of these issues? You know, we probably just talked there about $50 million a year in investments, or maybe not a year, maybe $5 million a year in investments in the city of Pittsburgh on the issue of litter. One of the things that's been talked about is the waste services in the city of Pittsburgh. So if you're a city resident, you don't pay for garbage service. It's a tax-based subsidy through city government. So I'm suggesting that waste collection ultimately is a utility. It's no different than water, electricity, or natural gas. You pay, or you should pay, on the unit that you consume. So you use a 96-gallon garbage can of garbage, you should pay based on that unit level. In the ideal world. The reality is, again, it's subsidized through tax base. Right now, looking at the city's budget, which is online, the environmental services shows about a $12 million budget. It works out to about $8.50 per household per month is the cost of service every resident is getting. And again, that is through the tax base it's being paid for. And just as an example, you could charge every resident $1 a month in the city of Pittsburgh for that service and recover almost $1.4 million a year. We heard a stat from Sarah that all the illegal dump sites would be estimated to be about $1.6 million to clean up. There's a quick and easy way to get to that number. $1 a month, I would argue, is not a big onerous fee, especially when you compare it to the region. The average person in the suburban area is paying upwards of $20 a month for that same service. And they're getting the same service. I mean, the city does provide a very, very impressive service for $8.50 a month. Again, it's food for thought. It's something to think about. Is this a political decision? Is this a policy initiative that people want to see move forward? It's not for me to say. But it's, again, a teaser, if you will. And I think there's one last slide here, and I threw this in. This was taken this weekend at the regatta. We had a film crew go down to look at public event litter issues. And hopefully this video will play. And again, it's food for thought to think about, this issue of litter. Here's a great example, hopefully a great example. Maybe the screen won't let it go. That documents, again, the reality of you're in a public space, you're at a public venue event, you've got that coffee cup, and in the video it shows you've got that dirty diaper. What do you do with it? People are actually pretty prone to just leave it where they stand. And so we see mountains of litter come out of these events. It begs a question on permitting within the city, on how do we manage these events. It goes all the way to the Luke Bryan concert or whatever else going at Heinz Field, or to be frank, a Steelers game and the impacts on the north side that result from that event. We really need to consider, no, it's not going to play, that we have policy opportunities around this issue that we can avail ourselves of to have great impacts here. To require large major public events to have waste management plans in place, not just check a box, we recycled at the event, but to have rather intentional plans. They will manage the waste generated and avoid the litter in the first place. And ultimately, people that learn that at that event will hopefully carry that home and not litter on the roadsides. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you. Joining us next is Missy Rosenfeld and Myrna Newman. Missy's from the city of Pittsburgh. She's our litter compliance officer for the city of Pittsburgh.
That's a good title.
I like to make it up. And Myrna is the executive director of Allegheny Cleanways.
Littering and illegal dumping, as this says, are not only expensive, but they're also, how do I do this? They're also crimes. And that's what we want to bring home today. We often don't think of them as crimes. We think of them as just unsightly, inconvenient, all those things, but they are indeed crimes. Okay. And in fact, this is the code, and I think Sarah talked a little bit about the litter code, but there, clearly there's, in our city code, there's an ordinance against litter, and yet there's still litter. There's also a fairly significant 2 points on illegal dumping. One in particular about the general illegal dumping that we tend to clean up, the construction debris, tires, that sort of thing that are dumped illegally from a vehicle, but then also hazardous waste as well, and we've seen a little bit of that dumped. Okay. And yet there's still, this is one example of a dump site, another dump site, lots of dumping in the city.
Those are our dump sites.
Those are our dump sites. Yep. I could tell you exactly where they were too, but I won't. These crimes hurt the city in so many ways, and these are just a little bit of them. Clearly, I mean, we're known as a beautiful city. We are a beautiful city, but the litter and the dumping certainly diminish the aesthetic of the city. In addition to that, they pose significant health and safety risks to residents. We clean up a lot of wooded hillsides or just wooded lots that are loaded with broken glass, rusted metal, tires that are holding water. Those are real health risks to the residents living near there, as well as harming plants and animals, contaminating our waterways, and that's a big one to all of us, degrading the quality of life in our neighborhoods, decreasing property values. We don't know, we're actually Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful is working on a study on what the costs of illegal dumping are really to a community. We don't have that stat, but the Still Valley COG, and I might have said their name, but the COG associated with the Still Valley did do a blight study, and they looked at things like how does blight affect property value? How does it affect the taxes that are being lost to the community through blight? And they found that between $200 and $250 million are lost every year. Well, property decreases $200 to $250 million every year due to blight. Lost revenue is upwards of $800 to $10 million a year. So it's a significant loss to the communities as well. And then, of course, we know that it leads, that broken window theory, blight and dumping leads to other crimes as well. And then this is what both Justin and Sarah kind of talked about, the costs. With the enormous costs that they were stating, and maybe they're not that huge, but couldn't those resources be used in another way? And if $1 million a year certainly could be used in some other way in the city instead of cleaning up illegal dumping and litter. This picture just kind of shows just about all of those things I just mentioned. This is a hillside in the city. That's Chartiers Creek over there, so right along the waterway. I mean, it's ugly. It's caused erosion. It's detrimental to the animals, the wildlife, the humans that live in this area. It kind of hits them all. And it's hard to clean up and costly to clean up. Fortunately, in the last several years, we've made great strides. The city of Pittsburgh has made great strides in enforcement, and we're just thrilled with that. We've been working in Allegheny County for 15 years now, and enforcement has always been a difficult nut to crack. And in the last several years, we've been very grateful for what has happened here in the city. In 2012, one of the most important things I think that happened was that Missy Rosenfeld was hired as an anti-litter coordinator for the city. And just having her there advocating and doing all the work, the incredible amount of work that she's been doing for the city is very helpful. Another kind of breakthrough for us was that in late 2013, we were awarded a grant from the Allegheny County Conservation District that allowed us to purchase some surveillance cameras. And with Missy's help and with the city's help, we were able to donate those to the city, and they were able to use them to catch some of our first convictions anyway, as the result of the camera footage in July of 2014. And then Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful donated additional cameras later that year. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Missy at this point. And this is just some of the process. These are the signs that were put up.
They were made by the traffic division. You have to have a sign before you place a camera.
And then there's a picture of the actual cameras too.
Okay. Do I need to be Vanna White, or do you do this? Okay. So basically, I was asked to just explain the enforcement procedures just with illegal dumping. First and foremost, I just have to thank some people that are here that I would not even be able to enforce if it wasn't for DEP, Tony Martinelli and Bruce Gerhardt, who have and continue to assist me in placing and affixing the cameras, pulling them, viewing them on a laptop, and also Detective Matt Labetta with the City of Pittsburgh, who's given me my rookie badge and kind of taught me hands-on in the field how to question and in every step that you have to take in order to build a case. So without them, there wouldn't even be any kind of enforcement. So basically, I get the reports either from 311, community residents, nonprofits, reporting council, and Dan Gilman too, I want to thank. Councilman Dan Gilman. I get reports from them, and I basically go out, I visit and assess like it says. I photograph to record what kind of dumping material it is it maybe an ideal spot for a camera later on in the future. After that, when I collect the evidence, if there's no camera present, I have to slice through bags and try to find some physical evidence that will basically ID the dumper, whether that be a receipt, mail with a name and address on it. I've had prescription bottles, and what I do with that is when I go back to the office, I have to try to research and find, does this person exist? Do they have a contact number, and so forth. With the camera, it basically is the same thing other than Bruce assists me, and we take it down. There's a little card inside. We remove that, and remotely on site, we put it into his laptop, and we view image by image to see if we can come up with the license plate of the violator plus the actual act of dumping, which you need in order to prosecute. So that, oops, okay, thanks. After that, we question, and sometimes we do that via phone with Officer Labetta has assisted me with, or we actually rap on the door, which Bruce and I have done, and to question. Like at one time we had a partial plate, but we didn't have, this was recent, and we didn't have the act of dumping, and this was in Belsuver. So what we did was we found addresses after we sliced through. We saw the pickup truck. We went to this address, and we saw that pickup matched what we saw on camera. And then we proceeded with questioning, and a citation was issued. And that brings me to, after that, I write the citation, and I issue it, and I file it with the courts. And then I appear in court to testify. And so far, of the 6 that I've had, 2 of them are pending for illegal dumping, but the other 4 have all been successful, and they've been fined. Do you go to the next one? Thank you. Oh, this is just a picture of actually the very first dump site that we ever placed a camera, and that was Renfrew Street. And this was habitual for years and years and years of dumping, and massive amounts of dumping. So we placed a camera there. It's not as easy as you think it is. Like, you just say, put up the camera and think that you'll find something, but there's been a lot of close calls to where they have 2 access points, they come in, they go out another way, or they dumped on further, and you don't catch them. But we did catch 2 people here and find them for dumping. Issues.
Oh, I'll jump in here. Okay. So one thing that I made this slide. All right, I'm gonna just confess this, and Missy was a little nervous about this. So the point here is that not everyone sees litter and illegal dumping as serious crime. To me, that's an obvious statement that people wouldn't be dumping and littering all the time if they saw it as a serious crime. This does not necessarily relate to this next city leadership part. Doesn't mean that city leadership has not been in support of what we've been doing. They've been incredibly supportive, actually, as has law enforcement officials and magistrates. We're just saying that everyone needs to be on board for this to be successful. So city leadership, law enforcement, magistrates,
Across the board.
Across the
Yeah.
board, and then citizens as well. So we all need to be on the same page. We all need to say, yes, this is a serious crime. So.
And I lost a lot of sleep over that. But
Yes.
Go ahead to the
So,
next.
not saying anything bad about the city.
Next slide, thanks. So this brings us to challenges again with enforcement. Not adequately funded. I don't have any money, and I never have. So basically what I've relied on was a lot of donations, and that was with time, such as DEP, giving free service to help me install the cameras, view the cameras, and as well as, Officer Labetta, Detective Labetta, cameras from Keep PA Beautiful, Allegheny Clean Waste. So I've basically kind of begged and borrowed. And so it would be really nice if maybe a little more focus, or maybe in the budget, that we could maybe enhance the program that we currently have. And that would be definitely more personnel. It's me, and only me, and citywide. So that's just just one responsibility I have with my job. It isn't just illegal dumping. I do Beautify Our Burg. I do every volunteer project. So it would be really nice to do what other cities, like follow the trend what other cities are doing, and that's kind of creating a task force. A little more manpower would be nice. A detective, a public safety officer would be nice because he's the one that's able to run all of the license plates and so forth, as well as more cleanup crews. Additional cameras and equipment. I have 3 sets of cameras, and they total 8. Normally and ideally, you want 2 to 3 cameras per site. So it would be nice if I had more people and more cameras. There's over 500 sites. I can move them more often, and we would be more successful with catching dumpers. More cleanup is needed. Public Works has been amazing. Each division, I work with them on a daily basis, and they're doing outstanding work. However, maybe with that task force, you have a particular person who's assigned, or you look at another group who you can maybe contract out, who could help with the work. Public outreach and education. This would be nice. Actually, we were thinking about pamphlets for people to refer to, how to report a dumper, what to look for, not to question, and also to ask for a receipt. Most of the places that I've been, and with the cases I've had, it's not the person whose material you find there. Like, after questioning, they've hired somebody to clean out, to somebody has died, and this is what happens. So, and then you have the risk of ID theft. So public outreach and education to the public as well as the haulers would be ideal. Do I have any more? Oh, I'm done. Okay, so thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your interest.
Next up, we have Dr. Erik Garrett from Duquesne University, who's going to talk to us a little bit, I think, on a different level about the issue of litter and what we can do or what we are doing about it.
Okay. First of all, thank you to Sarah and the commission for the invitation to speak here. I'm really focusing kind of on 2 questions, a little bit kind of the question of why do people litter, and then looking at some examples of behavior change campaigns that have taken place in other cities around the world, and maybe to help kick off some of the brainstorming session that's going to come next, where we're answering the questions that people generate online and actually in this room. So the sort of first question is sort of asking, why do people litter? And so there we go. And try to understand sort of the psychology behind what causes some of the people to engage in littering. So I've begun with just sort of this was actually photographed from last year's Kenny Chesney concert, which got a lot of bad press in terms of the amount of just trash that was generated. And so coming up with some reasons why people litter. First is peer pressure, lack of easy access to garbage receptacles. There's an anonymity element. There's no perceived punishment by those who litter. Some are doing it just to against authority. They're doing it sort of to out of spite. Some people feel that it's someone else's job to take care of it. We've heard this before, that they don't feel that they're responsible for this, or that if they litter, someone else is going to pick it up for them. And then finally, education. So dealing with that sort of last point from the last presentation about do people even understand what littering is? So these are just some brainstorming. I'm going to focus on sort of 2 theories that relate to some of these sort of aspects. The first one actually was just mentioned was this sort of broken windows theory. And the broken windows theory basically says this, that when there's a sign of disorder, something like a broken window in a community, that there's more likely then to generate more broken windows, more crime after that sort of first incident of destruction takes place. So this was a popular theory that came out of the 80s and was used a lot in New York City for various types of law enforcement to become a little bit more stricter on the enforcement end. And basically the idea was that when you have a broken window, you get more sort of general crime. Lately, there have been a couple of studies where people trying to connect this to issues of litter. So there was an interesting study, I think at a university in Texas, where they took the broken windows theory and were applying it to issues of litter. So you know how you have all those flyers on cars when you come out of a store or a concert? And so what they did was they put the flyers on the cars, and they found that people were 30% more likely to just discard and throw those flyers on the ground if they saw one already there. So if they had walked past on their way to the car a discarded flyer, they were 30% more likely to drop it than to sort of take it home and dispose of it on their own. And they actually found that if people saw someone actually picking one up or looking disapprovingly or saying something when they saw that litter, that actually they could get compliance almost down to 0. So the idea with the broken windows theory in relation to the litter is that once you have litter, it equals and generates more litter. That is sort of this critical mass that sort of will accumulate or can accumulate. The second sort of theory is one about issues of sort of anonymity. And this is sort of what we consider the movie theater syndrome, that when people go into a movie theater, they're likely just sort of to leave their garbage on the ground. And one of the reasons that people do this is sort of anonymous. It's dark, and people said, hey, look, this is the job of the people in the movie theater, clean it up. If I don't do that, then someone's going to lose their work. And so they sort of have this sort of moral, high ground, think, oh, I'm doing actually a good thing by leaving litter out, because then I can employ people in the city to do this, right? So there's some element that this sort of anonymity and not understanding the issue is very important here. So this sort of anonymous sort of theory is something that we have to sort of combat as well. So these are just sort of two theories that explain some of the sort of motivations behind the sort of causes for litter. But I'm really more interested in, I think our sort of role here is more thinking about, well, what can we do? How can we sort of motivate behavior change? And so what I'd like to spend more time talking about is some issues of behavior change. And so to start off with, what will that strategic sort of behavior change campaign look like? And I just want to get a couple sort of key elements. Of course, this is Keep America's Beautiful, famous Chief Iron-Eyed Cody, right? Cody. Yeah, campaign from the, what is that now, 50 years almost, right? Yeah, so first of all, that this behavior change campaign cannot be from the top down. So it must involve the community. It can't be done from, it has to be a comprehensive campaign that involves and gets full community buy-in in the different communities. So one of the community sort of planners I really admire, Jane Jacobs, talks about how an example in Harlem where people were not bought in and a sort of project was done and initiated without kind of public buy-in and actually completely failed. So you need to have sort of that full community support. Talking about a comprehensive campaign would be a balance of public and private and government, but also focus on preventative and not only sort of punitive sort of responses as well. I really admire the work of the commission and the PRC for this data in terms of, I think, is really important, and then sort of be creative in the responses. So first of all, I think any sort of campaign that we do needs to really involve the community from the very start. Have different you're going to have different motivations and different reasons for communities to participate in litter prevention in different areas. So the reason that someone would buy into a campaign in Shadyside would be different for someone in Hazelwood. So what we can do to sort of think about activating and motivating sort of the people on the ground, the grassroots, I think is very important to sort of realize and tailor for different sort of groups. And specifically targeting youth, I think that's also very important. One of the ways to do this is through the power of competition. PRC has the sort of Crying Steeler fan anti-litter video contest going right now. Is that extended, I believe? And so what you can do to sort of to activate and motivate kind of the community sort of to buy in through something along those lines, that's really, I think, important. So whatever you can do to sort of generate the community, I think really helps and matters. Studies actually show that just having a campaign helps, that the U.S. Department of Transportation has studies where I think there's 7 states that don't have a sort of statewide campaign, and those states that don't have a campaign at all tend to have a higher litter score than those that don't. So the American State Litter Scorecard. I remember Indiana was one of the ones that didn't have any sort of statewide campaign, and so just having a campaign, having those signs, having that sort of public acknowledgement, that starts, and just that start actually has shown some data in terms of correlation there between helping to eliminate issues with litter. The public and private partnership, I think, is also very interesting. In Sweden, there's an example of where the local McDonald's actually came up with an idea that they wanted to be better part and buy into the community, and so they actually involved in public spaces. They had sort of recycling bags, and if you brought in a certain number of cans, you would get a free cheeseburger or Big Mac. So the issue of public and private partnerships is something interesting that can be explored with some sort of future campaign. I think also thinking about preventative measures. So one of the questions that was sort of brought up about what to do with the data, I think, is very important. So if the element, we see that there's certain sort of spaces where we tend to have high amounts of litter, just by maybe increasing the amount of collection cans, or doing something so we can be aware of where's the sort of flow of waste, and sort of being able to respond appropriately, I think, helps. So not only having the punitive measures on the outside, on the end side, but also on the start, thinking about what can we do to prevent litter from even taking place to begin with. Okay, so knowledge is power. I think the data collection is really important. Sometimes just our problems can be solved just by shifting garbage can collection around, maybe being more aware of the times of day when litter is likely to take place. Here's two other sort of campaigns sort of to end with, kind of to talk about. One, Toronto actually just had a very sort of public, famous campaign that took place. What they did was the city went around and actually took litters, collected litter, and used it in their sort of public campaign to sort of to insult sort of the litter bugs. So you have things like calling people pig and dipstick, and these were, I think, the more mild ones. And they actually generated a lot of sort of press and publicity, and it was so successful actually that some of the brands actually were taken back by how quickly this took off and the amount of press that was generating. So they actually sort of forced the city of Toronto to pull those campaign ads, but they generate a lot of conversation sort of nationally, very internationally in terms of this sort of campaign. The other one was just I think this past month that Hong Kong just released that they're actually taking from things like cigarette butts. They're actually going to take DNA samples, and these are actually signs of genetic images of faces of people who litter. And so what they did was they took the DNA from like the cigarette butt and were able to generate sort of a wanted poster for the people who had engaged in sort of littering. I don't think we were there, but I think it's sort of interesting to sort of think about some of the different examples that different cities have done in terms of for us as well. So why bother with sort of any sort of anti-littering campaign? Sort of maybe to direct us towards our some of the questions is, first of all, really to realize that this issue of littering does matter. There's in the previous presentation we talked about the high costs. So the direct costs for cleaning this up, that there are some connections to increases in other elements in terms of crime, that public health and safety. This is issues of civic and community pride as part of our identity of the city of Pittsburgh. That to be a clean city and sort of to maintain that. That there's an ecological impact that a lot of, I think, people who especially litter don't understand, that piece of garbage that you throw down in the ground here doesn't stay there, how it kind of travels in our waterways and all across, all through our environmental systems. And then the impacts are for future generations, that this is a problem that will affect us for years to come. So so to sum up here, the things I was hoping to look at is to look at what are some of the motivations for people to litter, and then to think about what types of campaigns that really work and how we can respond. And when we respond, to respond in this sort of a comprehensive, strategic way that really takes in consideration the local sort of face here in Pittsburgh. But I think also important to look at what are some things that are being done elsewhere as well. And that's it. So thank you. I think Grant.
Well, great. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for enlightening us with, helping to frame out this issue. Obviously, it's a complex issue that deals with, individual behavior, city systems, national systems, statewide systems in terms of how do we collectively address the challenge of litter and dumping. Before we move into the question and answer session, we have Mayor William Peduto here with us today. One of the great things as part of the Mayor's Roundtable series that the Mayor has established is, one, we get this opportunity to learn about the work of many of the folks across the city of Pittsburgh that are doing and really highlighting the efforts of organizations like the Clean Pittsburgh Commission. So we've asked the Mayor to join us today to provide us some remarks, some words of encouragement, some guidance with regards to some of the efforts that he sees as being opportunities in terms of how we can push some of these challenges, how we can push some of these boulders up the hill, if you will, and into the trash can maybe, or into the dump. So Mayor, if you can join us, please.
Thanks, Grant. I'm going to be kind of brief. First off, to the commission members that are here, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do with this commission. It's a team effort, and I think that most of you understand we have two factors that we face with this. Number one is a cultural. There's an inherent, and Professor is absolutely right, there's a inherent cultural belief that littering is not a negative. You see it within not just the city's borders, but as you go throughout western Pennsylvania, every November as the trees go down and the hillsides show the tires and the refrigerators and the waste that's been dumped there. You see it in neighborhoods and the trash that's collected around bus stops. And that cultural part of it, that part that is in the mindset is going to take a while, but it can be changed. There's an entire war that was waged over decades about cigarette smoking, from the point where people had doctors recommending certain brands to the point where it is today. But it was a cultural shift that had to occur, and it took time to get there. The second part's just hard work. It's just the work that you guys do. It's getting out there and being able to do it. I can hire 200 more public works employees, and we're still going to have a litter problem. It has to be an all hands on deck team effort, and it has to be coordinated. Our role is to empower. It's to give more resources to those that are doing the job and to be able to coordinate the efforts so that they're happening in concert. If we start rowing together, we're going to have the ability to do more. And we've taken it out of just being a public works issue. It now becomes part of our sustainability initiative. It's a part of Grant's office and our public works office. It becomes part of our entire plan when we talk about how do we build a sustainable city. It now becomes a part of that. So this commission's role travels. It doesn't work simply in a manpower initiative, but it works in a messaging, cultural, and sustainability part as well. And that's really where we need to be, because we can do a lot more. And to be honest with you, we need to do a lot more. Neighborhoods, and you can see it in small areas or you can see it on larger scale, are messy. They have litter that has accumulated, and we've started to do what we can on our own end to address it through basically a broken window theory. We start by taking the trash receptacles off the street, scrubbing them down, getting the gum off, getting the cigarettes off, and making them more appealing. We start by working with our public works crews that are going around picking up the garbage, and now we have brooms on the trucks as well, so that when the garbage bag breaks or something is there, we take care of what we need to be able to take care of, and we start to work on it that way. On the other side of it, it really does become an effort of working with all the groups that are here. For the other groups that are here, PennDOT and others that are here joining us at this meeting, we need to expand to include you in this. It has to be more than just the commission itself. It has to include all the different government agencies as a component of it. And that's really where we need to take it. We're here. I'm going to stay around for a little while to listen. I want to hear your ideas. I want to know about the technology. The recent addition of the cameras in the areas that we've had the dumping incidents at have been successful. But there's other technology that is affordable that we could be utilizing. I want to know what those are. And I want to know how we can help you with your organization to make it stronger. So thank you, and thanks for the work you're doing.
So, first of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Peduto for helping us convene everyone together here today. I'd like to thank the Pittsburgh cable team for their efforts in providing coverage, and thank all of you and members of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission for bringing together, a great conversation and the content here today. I think we've seen, one, the hard work that's being done, two, some pathways, that which we can all work together to help to sharpen the sword a little bit with regards to our efforts to litter and anti-dumping here in the city of Pittsburgh. So just a final round of applause for yourself. No golf claps. So with that, thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you, and let's see something by Labor Day. All right? Thanks, everyone.